Welcome back. So this is part 2 of our discussion on mindful eating. So we're first off going to discuss stress and emotional eating and how we can begin to use mindful eating principles to avoid turning to food as a form of comfort in those stressful or emotional states. Short-term stress often reduces hunger due to acute changes in hormones. So that's kind of that fight or flight response that I think we've probably all experienced. In an overly stressful situation, the body really shifts all attention and focus to dealing with that immediate stressor. However, with long-term stress, chronic stress that if is persistent and largely unresolved, the stress hormone cortisol remains elevated, which leads to increased hunger, cravings for sweet or fatty foods or both, and oftentimes an emotional dependence on food. So this can then lead to that unfortunate and persistent cycle of being in that stressed or emotional state, having that craving and giving into that craving, and generally reaching for something that's probably not very healthy for us. And over time, that can lead to weight gain, and that can lead to increased risk factors for things like heart disease and diabetes. So let's talk through a few strategies we can utilize to hopefully begin to limit or reduce some of the stress or emotional eating that is very common. So this technique is called the pause. So tell me if you've ever done this. In the middle of a stressed state or when you're emotional, you find yourself walking to the pantry. You might have your arm halfway in the bag of potato chips or reaching for the cookies. And it's almost like you're on autopilot, and it's before you even know what's happening, you're already reaching for those comfort foods. So in that moment, we can use mindful eating and specifically a technique called the pause to hopefully begin to limit those instances of stress or emotional eating. But in that moment, we want to be mindful of what's happening. We want to take that pause. So we're basically stopping to take ownership of that emotion or that stressor that's causing you to go to the pantry, and really recognize what's going on, what's causing that trigger. And you want to give yourself at least 5 or 10 minutes to really reflect on what's going on and possibly choose a different path, choose an alternative path in that moment. And ideally, we want that alternative to be a more positive, healthy coping mechanism, whether it be stress management tactic in that moment or some other alternative that helps us to avoid giving into that stress eating situation. So let's look at some ideas that we can utilize potentially in that moment to help us avoid reaching for that comfort food. Again, when we're taking that pause, we're really giving ourselves a moment to reflect, a moment to choose an alternative path, to utilize some stress management tactics in that moment, some things that are more positive coping mechanisms. So, and looking at alternatives, we could try to distract ourselves with possibly taking a short walk, listening to music or a podcast, doing crossword, a puzzle or game, watching a video, talking about what's happening in that moment to stress you out. Try some deep breathing potentially. You might chew some gum or look for a healthy snack. These are just some ideas. You know yourself. And the important thing is choosing something that works for you. So with mindful eating and utilizing the pause, this is meant to be a consistent strategy, and you might not be successful with it every time, but the more you utilize the pause, the better you'll get at avoiding those stress and emotional eating cravings. The more apt you'll be to choose that alternative, that positive coping strategy in that moment. So we've spent some time evaluating the differences between actual physiological hunger and hunger that's more stemming from stress or emotional type eating. So hopefully we have a better idea of recognizing what type of hunger it is and then how to deal with that hunger. And the next part of this discussion is on physiological hunger and using a tool called the hunger scale, which can help you identify your level of hunger and your level of fullness. But through using the hunger scale, we can have better control of our overall portion sizes. The hunger scale itself is a 0 to 10 scale. On the far left side of that scale, 0, 1, 2, those are denoting I'm empty, I'm starving and ravenous. In the middle, with 5, we have neutral, not hungry, not full at all. And on the far right side of that scale, we have at 9 and 10, I'm so full, I'm stuffed, and I'm nearly sick. But by using this scale, we hopefully avoid those times when we're sitting down to eat at a 0, 1, or 2 and we're absolutely starving. If we allow our hunger to get to that point, we're more than likely to eat much faster, probably eat more than we would have otherwise if we were eating at a 3 or a 4. And we're more likely also to make poor decisions. So at that point, much less likely that we'll have good control over our portions and the quality of the food that we're eating. In use of the hunger scale, we want to be mindful of our level of hunger. We want to try to eat at first sight of hunger. So as our hunger pangs are awakening and hunger awakes, that's at like a 3 or a 4. Again, at that stage, we're more likely to be able to eat slower, control portions, and recognize when I need to stop. Again, using the hunger scale, we want to stop at a 6 or a 7. So that's just satisfied or completely satisfied. If we're starting at a 3 or 4 before we're starving, we're more likely to be able to stop at a 6 or 7. So again, we're eating slower, we're paying attention to our satiety cues, and we want to eat when we're just satisfied, not full, stuffed, or certainly sick. So far in our discussion, we've spent time discussing the major principles of mindful eating and breaking down some of the individual components of mindful eating. But now let's discuss mindful eating and really putting it to practice. But before we even sit down to eat, hopefully at this point we've used mindful eating to be more in tune with our hunger and how we connect mood and food. So if we're sitting down to eat, we know that it's actually due to physiological hunger and not emotional or stress type eating. But ideally, we're making time for that meal. We're sitting down at a table. We're avoiding doing any type of multitasking during that meal. So there's no TVs, no other devices. Hopefully more times than not, we're dining at home because again, that allows us to control our portions and control exactly what we're eating. Again, we're eating hopefully more times than not at a dining room table, not sitting in our living room or in our car or at our desk. We're hopefully enjoying that dining experience and having conversations with others. And the idea behind this aspect of mindful eating is that we are truly making dining the event. And since you're making dining the event in that moment, you're also making time for that meal. You're giving yourself time to eat slowly, chew your food thoroughly. You might set your spoon or fork down in between bites. The point is that we're really taking the time to savor your food, enjoy the flavors, enjoy the textures. Using the hunger scale, you're eating until you're satisfied, but not stuffed. Fill your plate once with reasonable portions. So this is kind of what mindful eating looks like in practice. Another important aspect of stressful eating is the overall relationship that we have with food. And we want to take setbacks in stride. So be kind to yourself regarding, food choices that aren't quite what you want. Giving in to occasional stress eating and emotional eating. Dietary setbacks if we're not hitting some of those goals we may have for yourself. Just do your best to be kind to yourself. If you make a poor choice, start fresh the next meal. Start fresh the next day. Just do your best to remain positive towards yourself and your overall goals. Something we can do to help support your overall goals towards utilizing mindful eating principles is to control your eating environment. In controlling your eating environment, you may clean out and reorganize your kitchen. This might help if you're especially planning on cooking more meals at home. You may make sure that your dining area is warm and inviting. Again, with mindful eating, ideally you're spending more time at the dining room table. Best to make sure that you're warm and comfortable there. Make sure your pantry and your refrigerator align with your health goals. If part of your mindful eating approach is eating a healthier diet, make sure you have the foods that you need in your pantry and in your refrigerator. You may be trying to avoid certain foods, so keeping indulgent foods out of sight and out of mind is another great way to control your eating environment and support your overall goals of mindful eating. So if you're wanting to give mindful eating a try, how do you get started? Probably one of the most impactful things you can do is, again, making time for that meal or that snack. So really try to carve out that time, remove the distractions. This will help set the stage for timing within the meal and slowing down, especially. Again, that's an important aspect of mindful eating, really slowing down to enjoy your meal, enjoy your food, and be able to stop eating before you eat too much. Again, so that kind of leads into listening to your hunger, utilizing the hunger scale to begin a meal when you're just starting to be hungry, and finish a meal when you're reasonably full and not stuffed. And also listening to your hunger to identify, am I hungry right now because of a physiological need, or is this more related to stress and emotions? Once you can kind of differentiate between those two things, that's an important part of mindful eating also. And then finally, do what you can to be kind to yourself. We're all going to struggle at times with the choices that we make with food and reaching our overall goals. So please just be kind to yourself. And recognize that if you do falter, you can start fresh with that next meal or snack, or start fresh the next day. This brings our discussion of mindful eating to a close. Thank you for joining me. If you have any questions, please reach out at any time. Thank you.